Hello, welcome to part 2 of our tower defense game tutorial in Game Maker Studio 2. This time we're going to look at making towers, getting them shooting at our monsters and having our monsters die when they get shot. Actually quite a lot of stuff to cover in this one, so let's get to it. Okay, so first things first, we are going to draw the tower sprite and a bullet sprite. So let's go over to our sprites and create. I'm going to call this SPR tower, and it's 32 by 32, and it's gonna be sort of like kind of a fantasy magical tower. It's gonna be like kind of like a tree with an orb floating, or like a spire with an orb. You know, have like a floating orb here. And then like this will fire at the enemy. I find that if you like have more fantasy sort of imaginary designs, then you can get away with things not looking super realistic, which is good whenever you're drawing while trying to make things look good. So let me get to it. Okay, so I've created this little tower. It looks kind of funky, it's a bit weird, but I like it. It's gonna do the job. And I've given it this little orb at the top, which is kind of floating. It's like just a simple 2-frame animation. And how I'm gonna have this work is this little orb is gonna be the bullet. So that's what's gonna shoot at the enemies. So that means that creating the bullet is as simple as copying this, and now we have it in here, saved as a brush. So if I create a new sprite, SPR bullet, and then I go in here and I just need to open up the brush, and to make sure all the colors are the same, you want to make sure you've got white. Otherwise, if I had like blue, then it's going to change it. Maybe you'll want to do that, but I just want it to be the same colors as the tower. And we've got a lot of empty space around here. So to get rid of that, you can go up here to image and then auto trim all frames, and now there's no wasted space. You can also do that with with any of them. I kind of want to do it to my monster here because there's a tiny bit of space up here that I don't know, it bothers me. So let's do the auto trim all layers here. And now there's no wasted space. It's really good to do that at the very end. That's the very last step if you're creating sprites and you want to like save as much space as possible. Anyway, so we have our tower drawn, we've got our bullet drawn. Now let's create an object for both of those. So we need a tower object, obj tower, and assign the sprite to be the tower. And let's create a new object for the bullet, obj bullet, and assign the sprite for that too. Now, firstly, let's get the tower functionality working. Firstly, actually, I want to throw it in the room, see what it looks like. So that's what it looks like. I just wanted to see that. Let's go into the tower object and get some instance variables in the create event. So the tower is going to need, it needs a range, so like a tower range. It needs a reload time between firing bullets, and it also needs a target for it to fire towards. So the tower range, let's start with that. And this is going to be like the radius of the circle that the range is. So let's start, say it's 64 pixels, the tower range. And then we want the reload time for the shooting. So reload time, and say it will be like 1 second. Yeah, that'll do. So again, just like the tower or the monster spawner, you would type run speed Oops, I do that every time. Room speed, well, I guess, yeah, just room speed by itself is 1 second, so we can leave that. And lastly, let's get the target. So the target is going to be an object type. So like the target would be, for example, object monster. But you don't want to, this is going to target like any monster or every monster. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, this isn't like telling you to aim at a specific monster. Say you had 5, you want to be able to tell it which monster you're targeting. So in the step event, we're going to fill in an instance ID, which is more specific. But for the create event, you can type no one, and that means that to begin with, you've got no target, and if you've got no target, then you're not shooting at anyone. Okay, so to help us with making this game and debugging and things like that, and also this might be useful in your actual game, I want to be able to see the tower range visually. So I'm going to draw a circle around the tower that tells me how big the range is. So to do that, I need to go into the draw event. And firstly, you need to draw self, because whenever you open up a draw event, well, this code isn't going to be run. You're like overriding it, so you need to make sure that it still draws itself, otherwise it'll be invisible. And then we want to draw a circle around. So if you write draw circle, and you will have the X, Y, the R, which is radius, and then outline, which is true or false, if you want it to only be an outline of a circle, or if you want it to be like a fully filled in circle. So the X and Y is going to be the X and Y of the tower. So type X and Y. The radius is going to be the tower range that we've already initialized. And then the outline, let's set that to be true. So if I run this now, there should be a white circle around the tower. Here it is up here. And I want to change this to be red. And I also want to make sort of a transparent fill in here as well, just because I think it'll look cool. So in order to do that, to make it red, I'm going to change the color using draw set color, and then using one of the preset colors, C red. And so now this is going to draw a red circle. If I want to draw then a circle inside the outline, I'm gonna go above the outline, because that means the outline will be drawn after and therefore on top of the fill. So we just do another draw circle, X, Y, tower range, true. No. This is the difference, it's going to be false. This is going to make it fully opaque, which is a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it more transparent. See, that's no good. And I actually want the tower to be on top of all of this as well. So I'm going to cut that and put the tower after. And now to make sure that this fill is a bit more transparent, I'll change the alpha, draw set alpha, which is the same word as like transparency, and it's between 0 and 1, so I'm going to make it really quite faint. Let's say 0.1. And then I don't want the outline to be 0.1 transparency, but I'll change it to maybe 0.5. Draw set alpha 0.5. And lastly, I want the tower, so this is gonna draw a tower. This is gonna draw filled circle, and this draws the circle outline. So I don't want this to be 0.5 transparency, so I need to set this to be transparency of 1. So let's have a little look and see what that looks like. I'm gonna move this down a little bit so you can see all of the circle. It looks pretty nice. And it means that whenever we're like shooting, then we can actually see sort of how it's working, which is nice. Okay, so next we want the tower to be able to detect whenever there's an enemy in range, so inside that circle, and if there is, then we want to shoot at it. Now, let's go into the tower object. In the create event, whenever we're like doing this reload, basically how it's gonna work is I'm gonna make another variable, and it's gonna be called like ready to fire. And I'll set it to be true to begin with. So this is sort of like if the tower is primed and ready to fire, and whenever it's fired I'll set that to be false, and then after the reload time we'll set it to be true again, and only when it's true will it be able to fire again. That's just a really clean way to make sure you're not firing every single frame of the game. So let's go into our step event and get some more code in here. So we are going to want to know, firstly, if there's an enemy in range. Okay. So I'm gonna make, I can make a temporary variable here, enemy in range, and this is going to be a collision check. And similarly to like how we were drawing a circle, you can do a collision circle. If I type in collision circle, and this is going to be true. Well, actually, it's going to return. Let's see if this actually makes it any clearer. So your collision circle, it's a circle around your X and Y here, and it will give you the instance ID of any object that is inside the circle. Now, see here, it's telling us that this is colliding, this is colliding, and this is colliding. So whenever we type in collision circle, it's going to give us, seemingly randomly, the instance ID of only one of these. It won't give you the instance ID of all three of them. It just sort of picks one. And if there's nothing in the circle, then it will return like no one or -1 or -4, I think. So it's quite handy, but what that means is, let's go back here. So this enemy in range, if there is an enemy in range, then enemy in range equals the ID of a monster that's within the circle. So the X1 and Y1 is just the center of the circle that you're doing the collision check for. So that's again going to be the X and Y of our tower. The radius again is going to be tower range, just like when we drew the circle. The object that we're looking for is a monster, so we want to see if there's a monster in range. So object monster. Now the last two, precise and not me. Precise, it's checking whether you want pixel perfect collisions or not. And let's see, you can see here like this would be a pixel perfect collision, so that would be precise is true. And this one would be not a pixel perfect, so that's precise equals false. And you can tell the difference in them because like this circle and this circle are basically in the same place, but because this one's not precise, it's just using like a square, so it actually would be colliding, but this one's not. So using not precise is faster, so we're going to do that. It doesn't make a big deal. It makes it a bit easier for the towers to hit things, to see things, so it's a good thing for the player. So precise will be true. So I was editing the video and I realized that I had just contradicted everything I just said by setting precise to true when I wanted to set it to false. For the whole video it's going to be true. It doesn't make any difference, but I am changing it to false now. So in the future videos this is going to be false. It doesn't make a massive difference, but at least I'm sticking to my word now. And not me means if you're going to include yourself in the collision check. Because say the tower was a monster and you're doing a collision circle within like that around your X and Y, you're always going to be triggering it, but it doesn't really make a difference in this because we're not a monster. But I'm just going to say false anyway. Now the next piece of information we need to know is we're just going to aim, the targeting mode is just going to be aim at the closest monster. For now, we will change it later, but it's the simplest targeting type we can easily code in GameMaker using instance nearest. So let's create another temporary variable for this. Say closest enemy, and this is just equal to instance nearest, and you're going to say the X and Y of the point that you're checking. So again, that's the X and Y of the tower, and the object you want to check for is object monster. And if there are no monsters in the room, so if no instances of the monster exists, then this will equal no one or -4, just like this. So now we want to know if there's an enemy in range and we are ready to fire, then we want to fire a bullet. So that's going to be in an if statement with those two conditions. If enemy in range and what else was it? And ready to fire. Is that what I called it? Yeah, ready to fire. So this ready to fire, because it's true or false, you can just type in ready to fire like that without like, or you could say ready to fire equals true. They would both do the same thing. I can leave it like that for clarity's sake. So if enemy in range and ready to fire is true, we want to shoot at the nearest enemy. So first we want to prevent us from firing over and over and over again. So we'll set ready to fire equal to false so that this code doesn't get called again. Ready to fire is false. And we can also set up the alarm for the reload, and whenever the alarm is triggered, then we'll set ready to fire to be true. So alarm 0 equals reload time, which we've already set to be 1 second. And we can do the alarm now. It's going to be super simple. Let's go alarm 0, and all you're doing is setting ready to fire to be true. And that's it. So back in this if statement, now the last thing we need to do is just actually create a bullet and get it firing at an enemy. So what you will do is instance create layer is the command for this. Instance create layer. And we just need the X and Y of where we're going to put it. For now, we'll just put it at the X and Y of the tower, exactly. Afterwards, I want to move it maybe up a little bit so it kind of lines up with this one, rather than being spawning here or spawn up here, just so it'll look a little bit better, a little bit cleaner. But I'll do that in a second. Instance create layer. The layer ID will just use the same layer that the towers are in for now. And then the object that we're going to spawn is going to be a bullet. Object bullet. So doing this will create a bullet in the middle of the tower, but the bullet's not moving or anything, and it's not moving towards anything either. So what we're going to want to do is set the direction for the bullet that we spawn. In order to access the code of the bullet that we spawn, we can use something called a with statement, and it looks like this. You type with, put this in some brackets, and then you don't need this semicolon, you will open up some curly braces. And here, in here is code that is happening to the object. It'll only happen once, but it's good for exactly what we need, which is changing the direction of the bullet to go towards the nearest enemy. So if I say direction equals, and we're going to use the point direction, which is another function. There's a lot of like new functions in here, but they're all pretty self-explanatory, and I think if you're following along, it's easy to know like how you use them. So point direction goes from one coordinate to another coordinate, and then it calculates that direction. So the direction is going to be its x position and its y position, and it's going to go towards the closest enemy's x position and the closest enemy.y position. So in order to access its values, you'll type in closest enemy.x, closest enemy.y. Now, I have just remembered, well, there's two things here. The first thing is, I've used a private variable here, or a temporary variable, and that means it kind of doesn't exist anywhere else other than in this line of code. But in the with statement, it's like a new code area. So I need this to be able to be seen by the bullet, so I need to get rid of that. The next thing is there's still one more step that we need to make in order to allow this bullet to see this closest enemy, and we need to type in other dots. Whenever you're in a with statement, if you type other, then it's going to refer to the outside object of the with statement. So in this case, that would be the tower. So other dot closest enemy refers to the tower that has created the bullet. And then it goes to the closest enemy, gets its x position and the y position, calculates the direction. The only thing that's going to stop this from working now is the fact that our bullet, we haven't coded it to move. So let's go into the bullet's create event and just give it a speed. Speed equals 2. And now, whenever we run the game, our tower should be firing bullets at the enemies whenever they get in range. Let's have a look. Amazing. So it was pretty slow at firing there, and it was like missing the objects. We haven't actually told it to collide with them yet anyway, but even if we had, it would still be missing. So let's increase the speed up to like 5. And now we want the bullets to actually deal damage to the monsters. Now, we haven't actually given the monsters like health yet, so let's go into the monsters create event and give him like a health, HP, health points variable. And let's just give him 1 health point at the moment. So it's only gonna take 1 hit from a bullet to kill it. And now that this monster has health, we need to type in code to say that if health is less than or equal to 0, then destroy the monster, like then the monster dies. If HP is less than or equal to 0, then we'll just destroy. Instance destroy. And the last thing we want to do is with the bullet, we will type in whenever it collides with a monster, then it deals damage to the monster. So we're going to put this in the collision event with a monster. Here we're going to use the other keyword again. Whenever you're in a collision event here, other refers to the object that you're colliding with. So we are in the bullet typing code, but we're in the collision with a monster event. So other refers to the monster. So if we type other.hp minus equals 1, this is going to take 1 health from the monster. But if we didn't have other, if we just said HP minus equals 1, that would take away 1 HP from the bullet, which doesn't really make sense. It doesn't have any health, and then it would crash your game. So other.hp equals minus equals 1, and we also want the bullet to be destroyed so it doesn't just continue through the monsters. So here we use instance destroy again, and this will destroy the bullet. If we typed other here, again, that would destroy the monster, but we don't necessarily want to do that because it's already got code to destroy itself when it's got no health. Eventually you might have different bullet types that deal different amounts of damage, and you may want to like create a damage variable here equals 1, and then instead of saying minus equals 1 you can say minus equals damage, and that's going to work exactly the same. So let's run this, and now our bullets should be pretty quick and they should kill the monster whenever it hits it. You can tell that the bullet and the monster, they sort of destroy not touching each other. Well, it looks like they're not touching each other, but for now I'm just gonna say that's fine. But let's maybe increase the tower range on this just a little bit. So maybe 96 maybe. That looks pretty good. The last thing I want to change is to have the bullets spawn sort of up here. So what I want to do, I'm going to go into the sprite and see how many pixels above the origin like this point is right here. Because whenever like something spawns and you can't quite get like a middle, GameMaker uses like, see there's like 4 pixels there, sort of the middle. GameMaker is going to just use the bottom right one as the middle, and you can kind of tell that whenever you use like middle center, because it does it here. There's actually 4 pixels here and it shows in the bottom right one. So if I count up to here, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so it's 11 pixels. So whenever we spawn a bullet from the tower, we will say, instead of with instance create layer, instead of spawning it at X, it'll be X, oh sorry, at Y, it'll be Y minus 11. Minus 11 will be 11 pixels above the tower's origin. So if I try this, it should look just a little bit cleaner. It looks pretty cool now, I like that. I want to add some comments into this step event for the tower as well, just to make this a little bit easier to read. So here, let's put the comments maybe above. So here we want to check if enemy in range. Here, check for closest enemy. If enemy in range and ready to fire, shoot. This will prevent multiple shots. This is just reload, and this creates the bullet, and this gives the bullet direction. So that's it for this part. We have added our towers. They have range. They're shooting at monsters. The monsters are dying. That's a good amount of progress. And next, we are going to look at giving our monsters health bar, and also giving the player some lives, so that whenever the monsters go all the way along and like beat you, like they get past you, you're going to start losing lives. And we're going to have maybe some little icons on the screen to show that. It's going to look really nice. So if you're interested, stick around. I hope this has been useful or helpful, or both. If you've got any questions, fire away, and I'll see you in the next one.